Hello YouTube. This video is all about this rear end. We're going to take it out of the vehicle, clean it up, and put a center section in it. The process we're going to go through is we're going to lighten it as much as possible. We'll take the brake drums off, we'll take the backing plates out, we'll pull the axles out, and then it's just a matter of disconnecting the 4 bars and the coilovers, and the rear end will come out. So let's get started. This is a strange fabricated rear end, except Ford parts. The way you remove the Ford 9-inch axle is there are 4 bolts. There's 2 there, and then on the other side there are 2 more. Now, unfortunately, Strange doesn't put a hole in their flange so you can put a socket through. So you have to use a wrench to reach in and loosen those bolts by hand. And that's not hard to do. I mean, you just reach in and take the time, loosen each one. Once you have all 4 bolts removed, you can remove the reinforcement plate because it's notched, and that gets set aside. So the axle is going to be stuck in there. It's not going to come out. And what you can do is, if you don't have a slide hammer, take your drum and put it on backwards. Take 2 lug nuts, you put them on a little bit, a couple threads, and use it as a slide hammer, and it will come out. The axle will balance best if you grab it right in back of the backing plate. Balance is pretty good there, and you can remove the axle from the shaft without banging it around. And then the backing plate will slide off, like so. What I've done is I've put a floor jack underneath the rear end, supporting the weight of the rear end, but not picking up on the frame. The frame is supported by jack stands. So I've removed the weight from these 2 bolts that are holding the shock in place, and we can now take it off. And there's a spacer on that shaft, so don't lose it. Now we can take the top nut off and remove the bolt and remove the coilover. What's left holding the rear end in the frame are the 4 bars. And the 4 bars will allow me to exercise the rear end up and down, which is kind of the point of this rear end. And what I'm going to do is lower it down on a set of car dollies. And unbolt it. The next step is to loosen the remaining bolts that hold the 4 bars to the rear end. And 1 more. And the rear end should be free of the chassis. There we go. Now we got to clean it all up. Well, we're outside today. We're going to do some cleanup on the rear end by sandblasting. The plan is to get all the areas, like in here where I can't get with a wire brush, and I'll sandblast that. So let's get started. As you can see, it gets into the irregular spots really nice, and we'll tack the rest of the rear end with a wire brush. This is what the results of a couple hours of work with a sandblaster gave us. Here, let me give you a closer up look. This is what it's looking like right now, but we got to start worrying about getting the sand out of the differential, so we're going to start washing it now. So you might ask why I'm going to put water on bare metal. The inside of the pumpkin was all rusted up, so I had to do the inside of the pumpkin also, so it was going to get full of sand anyway. So now we're going to wash it out. What we did is we made a tool. We took a wire brush and welded it on the end of some all rod, and we're going to use that to clean out the inside of the tube here. We made it so it's going to wobble. And now we'll clean it out by ramming some rags through it. This is a fabricated rear end, so this is just a tube, and it goes clear through with no obstructions. And do that again. And we'll ram it through. That looks pretty good. I'll have you take a look. Here is the inside of the tube. What we have here is the rear end from eBay, and it looks to be in fairly good shape. We're going to clean it up. I'm not going to make this a rear end video because there's a lot of them out there. We're just going to take it apart and refinish the case. So you want to mark the caps to make sure you put them in the same position, and then just unbolt it. Keep the caps in an orientation so that you can put them back in the same way. Then you may have to spin the adjuster off a little bit and lift the center section out. Now I can remove the yoke, loosen the nut, and tap the yoke off. We removed all 5 bolts for the pinion carrier, and now we should be able to twist this out. It might need some persuasion with a rubber mallet, and you want to save the shim. We got to drive this seal out, and we want to be careful we don't drop the bearing, so keep an eye on that. And it should all come out. There's a shim in there, so keep the shim. We cleaned up the center section. We went through and lightly oiled everything so it wouldn't rust. We've powder coated the carrier, the yoke, and the pinion support. And now it's time to put it all back together. We'll start by assembling the pinion support. We'll slide the bearing down in, and it should just slide right in like that. And we'll put the oil slinger in. And then we would normally put the seal in, but because I destroyed the seal when we took it out, and I'm only doing this for mock-up, we're not going to put the seal in. So next we'll slide the yoke on. And you should use a new nut. We are assembling this pinion gear support for mock-up purposes only for driveline angles. You would not do what I'm going to do now if you were doing it for real. I'm going to use an impact gun to pull the yoke down onto the pinion gear. What we would have done If we were doing this for real, is set the preload of the pinion gear. This will work for us. We'll use the 5 bolts to draw the pinion support into the carrier. And we'll just use the impact to draw it up tight. We're not going to use the impact to tighten it to the case. We'll take and use a crosshatch pattern and tighten it up. And on to the next step. Next, we'll put in the ring gear and track lock assembly. We now tighten the cap bolts down just snug so that we can still turn the adjuster. I can still rotate the adjusters in. I want to hold the yoke and rotate the ring gear to see how much backlash is there, and I can tell that that's way too much backlash, so I need to adjust this adjuster in. We can adjust our preload by turning the adjuster in to a point where that's about right, and we can use that for our mock-up. Now we got to put the locking bolts in. And tighten them down. And we have a center section. A rear end needs a vent. Strange fabricated rear ends don't come with a vent. So we've drilled a hole and we've tapped it for a vent, which now screws in, and it's in a nice baffled compartment. So there's the vent, and if we go inside the rear end, we can see the baffled compartment that vent is in, and I've got a couple magnets stuck in there to pick up any chips that we get when we drilled it, and I also blew it out. I put the backing plates back on and spent some time bending up brake lines with the Y adapter and the flex hose to go to the chassis. I'll give you a close-up look. We come out of the passenger side wheel cylinder, run along the axle, run around the 4-link bracket, and up around the hump for the differential, and over to the connector for the flex hose that runs to the vehicle, and continue around the second bracket and into the wheel cylinder on the right side. So what we're doing here is we're welding a nut onto the axle to mount the flex hose from the car to the axle. We've got the Y adapter with the flex hose welded on, and now we've made some clips, and we're going to weld those on for the brake lines. And now we're welding that tab in. At this point, we're ready to prep the axle for paint. We have the brake line attachment points welded to the axle, and we also have the flex line attachment point welded to the axle. Boy, I wish I could weld like that. We have the axle prepped for paint. Looks looking pretty nice, and we're going to paint this next. Right now we're just spraying on the sealer. Well, we learned from our mistakes. We tried to paint too late at night, couldn't see what we were doing. We got drips, runs, and errors. So I'm in the process of sanding all those drips and runs out, and we're going to try again. And here we go with attempt number 2. And here we go with the first coat of gloss black. And here we go with coat number 2. We can't forget to clean up the axle shaft. Well, we've got the axle housing pretty much taken care of. Now what we need to do is take care of the axle shaft. So here we go. And this is what the axle shaft is looking like now. Congratulations, you've made it to the end of the video. There'll be more, but for now I think we need to take a detailed look at what we did. The axle's been reinstalled. It was reinstalled in the same way we took it out. The backing plate has been painted and the brake line comes out of the wheel cylinder. The coilover shock has been cleaned and polished. There's a clip on the axle for the brake line and it goes over the rear end to the Y adapter and flex hose up to the frame. We have another coilover shock and the brake line continues to the right side. We continue to travel around the axle to look at the front side. I didn't show you a front side view at start out, but we didn't even have a third member at the time. So we now have a center section and we're ready to do the next video on driveline axles. For now, that's it.